Welcome to Bench to Bedside, a weekly series of live conversations about recent advances in cancer, from the research bench to treatment at the patient's bedside.
When people think of cancer research, they often think of clinical trials leading to the discovery of a new drug. But there is much more to it. Researchers also focus on answering fundamental questions about cancer and how it develops. This is called basic research, a critical part of understanding and treating cancer. Every advancement we make in treating cancer begins with basic research. Hi, I'm Dr. Roy Jensen, Director of the University of Kansas Cancer Center. Joining me via Skype, our guest, Dr. Christy Neufeld, co-leader of the Cancer Center's Cancer Biology Program, and Cheryl Jernigan, a member of our Patient Research Advocacy Program called Pivot. Also joining us is Megan Peters, who is here in the studio to take our questions. And first I want to welcome Dr. Neufeld and Ms. Jernigan. What is basic research, and why is it critical to the understanding and treating of cancer, Dr. Neufeld?
So thank you, Dr. Jensen, for inviting me here today. I'm really happy to be here. The purpose of basic research is to demonstrate and determine how the biology of cancer cells is different from the biology of normal cells. So why do normal cells become unable to grow in a controlled manner, and why do they convert into cancer cells? What characteristics does a cancer cell possess that makes them different from a normal cell? And if we can determine these differences, then ideally we can design therapies that specifically block some feature or activity of the cancer cells that they require, but that normal cells don't require. In other words, we could target the therapy to kill the cancer cells and leave the normal cells unharmed. Cancer therapies and treatments, they're developed based on science, and you can't design an effective cancer therapy if you know nothing about how the cancer cell behaves. So as a basic researcher, my goal is to uncover as many details as possible about how a normal and cancer cell functions. So in relation to the name of this series, Facebook Live, Bench to Bedside, my role would be on the far end of the continuum, at the laboratory bench. And the knowledge from that basic bench research is taken then to the next step by someone called a translational scientist. And the translational scientist develops therapies that are based on these fundamental cancer biology discoveries made by the basic researchers.
So Cheryl, you are a member of the Cancer Center's Patient Research Advocacy Program called Pivot. Could you tell us about that program and what it means to be a patient research advocate?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Jensen. Pivot is an initiative to infuse greater community and patient engagement into all aspects of KU Cancer Center. We are an evolving community of patients, families, caregivers, and we are learning and working with researchers throughout the Cancer Center's research process. Pivot is all types of cancer, so it doesn't matter what type of cancer you have. It's survivors and co-survivors. Co-survivors are the family and friend caregivers. And we represent, or we have members at all stages of the cancer, from those at high risk to those who are metastatic. Being a patient advocate is about bringing patient perspectives and insights into the research decision-making process. We're the experts in living 24/7 with cancer. That's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That gives us understandings, insights, and wisdom that researchers, clinicians, and others who have not endured this journey simply just don't have. We energize and inspire researchers to urgently find answers on how to improve how patients feel, function, and survive.
So Cheryl, I suspect most of our audience would not be surprised by the fact that patient advocates would be involved in clinical research. What we're here to talk about today is how patient advocates can assist scientists who conduct basic research. Could you tell us a little bit about kind of what role you play in working with the basic scientists?
Well, I've got to first say that I don't call it basic science or basic research. I call it foundation research because, as you two have already explained, it's the foundation for which all improvements ultimately come from in prevention, diagnosis, and treatment. And so if we don't start with understanding what's important to the patient at the foundational level, it's hard for us to get to what patients truly want and need at the other end in a way that best meets patients' needs and wants. Basic researchers often don't ever see or interact with patients. That's not part of their job. They are at, quote, the bench, and it's working with mice or petri dishes. So our faces as advocates and our voices bring life and energy into the research. We help them remember and see just why their work is so vital. In fact, I had a basic researcher attend a Susan G. Komen survivor luncheon with me once, and she was just taken back by how many people had survived cancer. She didn't see that before. She never really saw patients before. As research advocates, we bring the faces and stories of patients into their lab and their work. We share patient stories and humanize and energize lab research. We reinforce important questions that patients care about, and we bring a sense of urgency to finding answers sooner than later. In other words, to find better ways to prevent, treat, and stop cancer.
So I think it's safe to say that one of the founding principles of Pivot is ensuring that the patient voice is part of all phases of cancer research, and that it's a critical aspect, and that we have a lot to learn from patients. So, given that, Dr. Neufeld, how do basic researchers then interact with clinicians? How is that process of translation, how does that work?
So ideally, there would be a two-way communication between the basic researchers and the clinicians so that each can learn from and inform each other. The clinicians, they can share with the basic researchers what they're seeing in their practice. So new symptoms, new concerns, maybe unmet patient needs, or some interesting biology that no one has ever seen before. And then the basic researchers, in turn, they can share with the clinicians their ideas, their strategies to get the clinicians' feedback about their findings. And hopefully, ideally, these two groups can work together to move the basic research discoveries closer then to becoming a cancer therapy.
So if you're just joining us, we're here via Skype with Dr. Christy Neufeld from the University of Kansas, Lawrence, and Cheryl Jernigan from the Pivot organization, talking about the role of basic research in developing cancer treatments. Also, Megan Peters is here in the studio to take your questions. And remember to share this link with people you think might benefit from our discussion. Use the hashtag #BenchToBedside. So Dr. Neufeld, you study the biology of the colon and how colon cancer can develop. Can you tell us a little bit about your research and how you came to be involved in colon cancer research?
Yes, I would love to tell you about my research. So first of all, I'll start out with some statistics. In the US, colorectal cancer is the second most common cause of cancer-related deaths when you combine the data from men and women. And in 2021, there's expected to be nearly 53,000 deaths because of colorectal cancer. So it's a very important and prevalent cancer. I first became interested in the colon after graduate school when I joined a lab that was finding proteins that your body normally makes that keep cancers from forming. And these are called tumor suppressor proteins. The audience has likely heard of the protein that Dr. Jensen, that you study, called BRCA1 or BRCA1. And this protein is important. BRCA1 is important for suppressing breast and ovarian cancers. I study a very similar protein called adenomatous polyposis coli, but we just refer to it as APC. And APC is critical for suppressing colon tumors, for keeping colon cancers from occurring in a person. And in fact, more than 80% of all colorectal cancers have mutations in the APC gene. The gene is just simply a recipe for making this APC protein. Based on all of the APC mutations found in colon cancers, I said 80%, we know that this APC protein is critical for keeping your colon healthy and normal. And my lab is focused on figuring out unique things that the APC protein does to keep cells normal and prevent colorectal cancer.
So Dr. Neufeld, how might your work then influence how we approach patients in the clinic that have this gene or a mutant form of this gene and therefore a higher risk for colon cancer?
So in colon cancers that have APC mutations, so basically these mutations are in the gene, which I said again was basically just a recipe for the APC protein. So in a patient that has an altered recipe, the cells make a defective APC protein and it can't do its normal job. So understanding everything that APC was supposed to be doing in a cell to keep it normal might allow us to bypass these APC deficiencies by replacing the function in another way. So as an example, imagine that you're put in charge of a manufacturing company. Day one of your job, your new job, a particular employee calls in and they say that they can't come to work. And you need to replace this person somehow. But to effectively replace this person so the company continue to operate smoothly, you need to know everything that they were doing in the company. So we're trying to figure out all of those tasks for the APC protein so that we can replace these functions if you have a defective APC protein. And another possible therapy is based on our understanding that these defective APC proteins found in colon cancers, they might have unique activities that actually can benefit a cancer cell. So the altered APC recipe doesn't just result in an APC protein that can't function to suppress tumors, it can't get to work, but this defective APC protein actively promotes cancer. So back to our management analogy, that person that they didn't call in sick, they actually showed up for work, they proceeded to do their job, and they just did their job so poorly that they even were interfering with other people's productivity. So in this case, we want to figure out ways to get rid of that person in our company or in our cells. We need to be able to figure out ways to block or inhibit that defective APC protein that's promoting colon cancer as a potential colon cancer therapy.
That's a great analogy. And Megan, I understand that we have our first question.
We do. Our first question is, why is it important for young basic scientists to partner with patient research advocates early in their career?
So I would be happy to take this question. So as Cheryl was describing, at the bench, when we're working at the bench and always at the bench, it's exciting, it's thrilling work, but sometimes you don't really think about the long-term goal of the work, which is to come up with cures and therapies for cancers. And so I think it's really wonderful if scientists at a younger age can work with patient advocates and start hearing about the concerns, the thoughts, in addition, getting input from the patient advocates about how the student can better present their research to general public. That's a skill that I think is important to develop in all scientists, but if you start people out early at the student stage, it's probably easier to learn it at an earlier stage.
So Cheryl, I'm going to ask you to weigh in on that question as well. And in your response, could you tell us exactly how you work with researchers and how you help them advance their career and understand the patient perspective?
I've done a lot of things with researchers, and a lot of the work that I do is with basic researchers. And I've got to say, the young investigators are the most delightful to work with. They haven't been indoctrinated into clinical and research speak so much that they have forgotten how to speak everyday language. And they're usually very, and can be once you start prompting them, very good about coming up with analogies, such as what Christy has done. Not all researchers have been very good at that, and I think that's because nobody's ever asked them to be, and that isn't one of the skills that they've learned. I mentioned that I've been involved and doing a lot of different things with researchers, but one skill that always seems to come to bear in whatever work I'm doing with whatever research is to help them translate their research into everyday language that everyone can understand and relate, and patients especially can relate to. And offhand, that may not sound like that's that important, but consider this. Research is becoming so specialized that it's not unusual for me to sit around a grant review table and talking with other researchers only to find out they don't understand what the research is saying either. So if researchers can't speak a common language with each other, how can they begin to work together, which they need to, given the complexity of cancer? How can they work together to better find answers for us to help us feel, function, and survive? And then researchers are also very dependent on us as taxpayers, as donors and investors to fund their research. And if we can't understand the value of the research or how it's going to impact patients, then we're less likely to write our congressman and tell them to, hey, put more funding into this. And today, patients, as I mentioned earlier, patient advocates are increasingly being asked to serve on panels reviewing grants for funding. And I can tell you as a patient advocate on those panels that if I can't figure out what the impact is, if the researcher has not made it clear on how they intend to have this impact patients down the road, I'm not too excited about saying thumbs up on the funding. And as Joe Theismann once said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And researchers being able to speak everyday language in language that everyone can understand is one way of showing you care. And being able to say what your research or what you intend your research to impact for patients to help them feel, function, and survive is so important in showing you care.
Those are great points, Cheryl. I understand we have another question, Megan.
We do. This question is for Dr. Neufeld. Is the APC gene mutation hereditary?
So the APC gene can be mutated in an inherited fashion. So you can inherit an APC mutation. In that case, you will have hundreds to thousands of polyps in your colon by the time you're in your 20s or 30s. So very young, and you will progress to get colon cancer by the time you're 40, unless you have your colon removed. That is, luckily, that is quite rare to inherit an APC mutation. But for the rest of us that did not inherit an APC mutation, as I mentioned before, 80% of those colon cancers occur with APC mutations. And those mutations are thought to occur very early in the development of the cancer. Even in that benign polyp in the colon, those 80% of those have mutations in APC. So it is involved in both inherited forms of colon cancer or what they call sporadic, which is just sort of general getting a mutation through the normal course of your life. Great question.
So I'd like to hear from both Dr. Neufeld and Cheryl. What is it that's going on in cancer research today that you find most exciting? And we'll start with Dr. Neufeld.
I find everything about it exciting. Every day we're learning new things that we didn't know the day before. And so this process of discovery is so exciting. The possibility that our new knowledge could lead to effective treatments of cancer is incredibly exciting.
And Cheryl?
Oh, that is a great question, because on one hand, I think it's very exciting that we've got all this new technology and increasing tools for researchers to use to be able to figure out, why are these cells operating different? What can we do to make them go away or to stop that? But one of the things that I also am very heartened by is that we no longer are just focused on how to keep the patient alive for as long as possible. Instead, we're focused on also what is the quality of that life. And so a lot of research is also going into helping patients feel and function better while receiving treatment, or while they have cancer, or when they get cancer. So I like the fact that we're looking at the patient as a whole person and not just a cancer cell that has to be killed. Because whatever treatments we have for patients ultimately has an impact. There's side effects, and I like the direction of trying to figure out what's the minimum amount instead of what's the maximum amount of treatment we can give and have the same result. And also, what can we do to minimize the side effects of these treatments and hopefully prevent them in the first place?
Absolutely. Have we taken care of all of our questions, Meg?
We have, but if folks still want to ask questions in the comments, we'll be monitoring throughout the day.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank Dr. Neufeld and Cheryl. That's it for today. To learn more about our cancer biology program, visit kucancercenter.org/cancer biology. Join us next week at 10 a.m. for Bench to Bedside. Thanks for watching.